Okay, so tonight's topic is making Aliyah against your parents' wishes. You'll notice the background is different than regular classes. I forgot to hit record, so this will come to you if you're watching it after in two recordings, a shorter first one, and then the actual class, which I managed to hit record in the middle. But let me just set it up for you. Okay, this is the tshuva. Somebody asked Rav Chaim David Halevi, spent a year in Israel. Okay, I'm not sure what year it is, so we don't know the historical circumstances. And I'm not sure if it was university or yeshiva. But the student says, I am a student. I spent the year in Israel. And the truth is that I love Eretz Yisrael. I want to stay. But and not only do I want to stay, I want to be Mekayim the mitzvah. I want to fulfill the mitzvah of living in the land of Israel. But it's going to cause my parents pain and grief, and they are against this. They don't want me to come. I love my parents, and I want to fulfill the mitzvah of Kibbud Av Va'em. Therefore, he sends the question to Rav Chaim David Halevi, tell me what to do. Right? Which is more important, living in the land of Israel or honoring my parents? When the two come head to head, and there's a clash, which one literally wins, right? Which is the more important value? Should I honor my parents and go home, right? Leave Israel? Or should I stay in Israel and disregard what my parents want? Now, as a parenthetical note, which is interesting, he writes that I made a few phone calls and I found out that this child is not an only child. I mean, there are other children to help if the parents need something, whatever it might be. And the only reason that he's going back is not to provide physical care for the parents, but because the parents will miss him and they don't want to be that far apart. He said, this is a very important detail. And I am poskening this shaila for this reality where there are more children. If there is only one child, he says, come back, ask me the question again. That is an interesting footnote. That's the last thing he says about it. I'd love to see the continuation of that, but that's not what he includes in the tshuva. Okay, the answer he says it's a very simple answer, but I want to help you make your peace with it. But I want to help you come to understand the issues and be comfortable with it. And therefore, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the value of Kibbud Av Va'em. I will then set up the value of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, living in the land of Israel, and then we'll see what happens when the two clash and come into conflict. Okay. The value of Kibbud Av Va'em. So he has a very fascinating read on the pasuk that describes the mitzvah in Aseres Hadibros. You probably don't have the source sheet yet. Maybe you do. Not sure how it goes out, but if you have the source sheet, it is the first source. If not, it's a pasuk we should be familiar with. I'll read it to you. Right? Honor your father and your mother. L'man ya'arichun yamecha, so that you'll have long life. Al ha'adama asher Hashem elokecha noten lach, right? On the land that Hashem is going to give you. Now that's a fascinating qualification at the end. The land Hashem is going to give you is clearly Israel. What if I am tremendously respectful of my parents in Long Branch and Queens? I do my best. I try and be respectful, do what I can. I don't get long life because I'm not in Israel. That's a question we'll leave. But it seems like a straight read is honor your parents. You'll live a long time as a reward. That's clearly how Chazal understood it. Right? And you'll live that long life in the land of Israel. Rav Chaim David Halevi reads this a little bit differently. I'm not sure it's pshat, but it is fascinating. He reads it as follows: you should honor your parents so that you collectively will have long life in the land of Israel, meaning you'll stay as a nation in the land and not get booted in Gullus. Right? What's the connection? He said a society that as a whole honors its parents has good values, right? Good people, kind people. Those kinds of people is what Hashem wants in Eretz Yisrael. And will stay a long time in Eretz Yisrael if our society, right, has those values as its foundation and its bedrock. That's how important Kibbutz Ava Aim is. It's the key to staying in the land of Israel. And furthermore, he says, I understand that it's very hard. You don't want to cause your parents pain, right? Most people don't want to cause their parents distress. They don't want to hurt them. They don't want to do something that's going to upset their parents. And he says, I understand all of that. Okay. In the second recording, I'm not sure whether they'll go out in two or they'll be spliced together. We'll pick up with the value of Eretz Yisrael, then see how they clash and see what his answer is. So I apologize for this little snafu, but hopefully you get the gist and it works nicely together. Yeah, so close. Well, I guess if you didn't come, then you're only getting half a class. Next time, sign on, people who are listening to this. Maybe I'll re-record the first 10 minutes tomorrow, but I won't do it now because that wouldn't be nice to you. But I'll do it tomorrow morning. Okay. All right. What about Eretz Yisrael? Now he says, I want to show you how important Eretz Yisrael is. Right, so if you look at the next source on the sheet, right, this is in Parshas Re'eh, Ki achrid Hashem Elokecha hagoyim asher taba Hashem al hareshet otam mipanecha. Right, when Hashem destroys the nations, right, that you're coming now to inherit this land, v'yarashta otam v'yashavta be'artzam, you will inherit it and you will settle the land. Right, that seems to be an indication. This is a very important thing. This is the land. Torah is full of, right, psukim that this is the land that Hashem gave to you. Right, this is what it is. He has two. There are two other fascinating sources on this pasuk which he marshals. Again, why he chooses these, I'm not sure. There are so many others, and there are better ones. But I think we're going to kind of go through the tshuva, and that's again generally how we've been doing it. So we'll kind of do it that way. The Medrash Haggadah. So again, everyone should have the source sheet. It's in the chat. So if you don't, do you not see it?
You're saying, Rabbi, that it's posted in this chat here?
It is posted on the chat. Yes, I did. No, Jeff's making sure I hit the little button to put it up.
Did he join after you did that?
All right.
I can repost it. Hold on. I will repost it now. Okay, it's up again. So if you see it now.
I see it. Yeah, I see it.
It's there now, Rabbi.
I didn't have it before, haven't I?
You have to be on before, I guess, before I post it.
Yeah, that must be right.
That's a weird quirk of Zoom. Okay. All right. So we are in the middle of establishing the importance of Eretz Yisrael. We had the pasuk that was the third source on the sheet, right? The last four words, v'yarashta osam, right? You will inherit the people, v'yashavta be'artzam, and you will sit in their land. So he quotes the next two sources, the two midrashim that he quotes. We'll read them inside, and then we'll come to our answer, and then I'll tell you what he should have spoken about and did not. Right? V'yarashta otam v'yashavta be'artzam, said the Medrash Haggadah, Michlal shenemar v'yarashta v'yashavta be'arehem u'bevatehem. Right? Earlier it says, or later on, right, that you're going to inherit their cities and their houses. Yachol enata rasha lahosef al binyan. Maybe you're not permitted. Maybe you live to sit in their houses, right? Talmud Lomar comes to say no. B'yarashta osam, you inherit them. Yashavta be'artzam, you sit in the land, not in the houses. Kol makom she'ata rotze livnot bana, any place that you want to build, you build. Mikan amru yeshivat Eretz Yisrael shkula keneged kol hamitzvot shebetorah. Right here, you see. It's not clear where you see it from here, but that Eretz, the settling the land of Israel, is equivalent to all of the mitzvos in the Torah. Now, I've said many times, so is Talmud Torah, so is Tzitzis, so is a lot of things. That is the rabbinic way of saying this is really important. Because it's not true that one mitzvah will ever be equivalent to all the mitzvahs in the Torah. That's a factually incorrect statement. But it's Chazal's way of saying it's really important. Right? And the next, if you look at the next source, right, here it is a little bit more special. Got some other stories involved. This is the Yalkut Shimoni. Look at the second line. The first line, the first line and a half is just a repetition of before, where it says Dalid Aleph, which is Davar Acher, right? V'yarashta Osam, that you will inherit them. And he tells you the following story. Ma'aseh Rabbi Yehuda ben Besever, Rabbi Masya ben Charash, right? These two rabbis, Rabbi Chanina ben Achai, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Yonasan, you have all of these different rabbis. Shahayu Yotzin Chutz La'aretz, they're leaving the land of Israel. V'higiu lefaltos, they come to Faltos v'zichus Eretz Yisrael, and they remember that they left. They see Eretz Yisrael, right? Zakfu einehem, they look back. V'zalgu dimoseihem, and they start to cry. V'karu bigdeihem, and they tear kriya. V'karu es hamikra, and they said out loud the pasuk. V'yarashta v'yashabta bam v'shamarta la'asot. You're supposed to inherit the land. You're supposed to sit in the land, right? Amru, and they said at that point, this is the more elongated version. Yeshivas Eretz Yisrael shkula keneged kol hamitzvos shebetorah. Right, and then there's another story with Rabbi Elazar ben Shamuah, Yochanan Sandlar, that they're going to Nitzivan to learn Torah, and it's the same exact story. When we read it inside, it's the same story as you go through. Right, leaving Eretz Yisrael causes such distress and such pain that they start to cry and they tear kriya, and they can't believe what they are doing. Right. So, what has he done so far? We have the question. We have the importance of kibbud av v'em, the importance of being sensitive to your parents' suffering, and then we have the great value of living in the land of Israel. Okay. Now, when you pit those two against each other, right, which one wins? For him, it is abundantly clear. Right, this is the halacha that Sid mentioned before. Right, so if you look in the Rambam, the last source on the page, the Rambam, this is in Hilchos Mamrim. Right, you have the Hebrew and the English. Misha amar lo aviv la'avor al divrei Torah. Right, if your father tells you to violate the Torah, ben amar lo la'avor al mitzvahs lo sa'aseh, to violate a negative commandment, right? Go eat the pork chops. Olevat al mitzvahs aseh, right? Or don't put up your mezuzah. Afilu shel divreim, even a rabbinic mitzvah. Harei ze lo yishma, you're not supposed to listen. Shene'emar ish imo ve'aviv tirau, you have to fear your parents. Ve'et shabtotai tishmor, but you got to keep my Shabbos. Kulchem chayavim bichvodi, all of you are obligated in my honor, says God. So when your parents tell you to violate God's honor, you don't have to listen. And therefore he concludes that you have to make Aliyah and you shouldn't listen to your parents. Right? And then he says, Shezeda'as kol gedolei haposkim. This is the opinion of all of the gedolei haposkim. Right? Now, what does that assume, Sid? Right? Sid asked the question before. It assumes
that moving to Eretz Yisrael is equivalent to
keeping Shabbos.
Keeping Shabbos.
That it is a mitzvah.
Right.
Right? And therefore, Chaim David Halevi absolutely believes that making Aliyah is a mitzvah. And now the calculus is simple. Your parents are telling you not to perform a mitzvah.
Right.
And you shouldn't listen to them, right? So I want to finish the tshuva, but I do want to come back to this point because this is a very important point. He then says two other things that are fascinating, right? One of them is we just have to go back to last week's parsha, a week and a half ago, right? Lech lecha me'artzecha me'melazcha me'beis avicha. Well, you have to leave when Hashem tells Avram to leave. He tells him to leave your land and your family, the place where you were born, right? He argues that. Why does he spell all that out? Because he knows it's difficult. He knows it's hard, right? It's hard to leave the place that you grew up and the place that you were, unless you hate it. But, right, for the most part, you have good, fond memories of growing up in a particular place. And it's what you know, and you know the stores and the trial, whatever it is, you know how it works. It's hard to leave, and it's hard to leave your family. And nevertheless, Hashem tells Abraham, Lech lecha. This is kind of ingenious, right? He says the first time that somebody is told to make Aliyah in the Chumash, it involves distress. It's hard. It's not simple, but that he believes is built in almost into the fabric of Aliyah. Now, again, the mitzvah is not from Lech lecha. It's from Sefer Devarim, but that is, right? He believes where it begins, and you can understand that even though it's tough, you have to go anyways. That is point number one. Point number two, well, actually, he has two more points. Both of them almost like scarily prophetic. The other one he says is, how you get the older people to make Aliyah? Send their children, right? So he says, you go, and eventually your parents will follow you. It'll be okay, right? That's number two. And number three, right, he has this very end kind of footnote that I guess part of the issue was the safety. He says, don't think it's so safe in all your diaspora countries. Like, there's no guarantee that the safety is there forever, and don't fool yourself to think that it's going to be wonderful forever in the diaspora, and that Israel is so dangerous and so terrible. Right? You should rethink that also. With that, he tells this young man, you should strengthen yourself, and you got to make Aliyah, and you got to come. Schlep your family with you if you can. But that's the end of his tshuva. What is, again, it's fascinating tshuva. It's a question that comes up all the time. It's an interesting question. What is most noteworthy to me is that there are two primary sources that every tshuva on this topic discusses that he doesn't even bother to bring. And I'm sure he knows them. I don't know why, right? And that is very famously in the Rambam's count of 613 mitzvot. Take a wild guess which mitzvah is not on the list of 613 mitzvot.
Living in Eretz Yisrael.
Moving to Eretz Yisrael, living in Israel is not on the Rambam's list of 613 mitzvot. So now if we go back to Sid's question, right, and say, well, is living in Israel analogous to keeping Shabbos? According to the Rambam, we might say, no. Right? The Rambam does not count this as a mitzvah. Now, the Ramban, right, Nachmanides, so the Rambam is Maimonides, Nachmanides, what he does is very, very kind of bold and somewhat chutzpahdik, but it worked for him because we're still quoting him today. The Rambam has a list of 613 mitzvot. The Ramban also ends up at 613 mitzvot, but he thinks that the Rambam put some in by mistake and forgot to include some. So the Ramban, Nachmanides, as a commentary to the Sefer HaMitzvos of the Rambam, has what is called the mitzvos that the Rambam put in by that he shouldn't have, and then he has shichachas, right, ha'asin, the forgotten positive mitzvot the Rambam forgot to count, and he has forgotten los ases the Rambam forgot to count. And in number 4, right, mitzvahs aseh that the Rambam forgot to count, right, that's why I say it's like a little bit chutzpahdik to tell the Rambam you forgot, buddy. Like, nice job, but here are a couple of errors for you. A few mistakes, I'll fix it up for you, and I'll help you. Although that's not how he wrote it.
Blame the editor.
No, this is, no, he was very clear, right? So
How many
the
years were between the two?
80. The Ramban is the next, like next half century in Spain.
But even if it's not a mitzvah to go, there are numerous mitzvahs that can only be done there. So it's sort of like a precondition.
So let me finish the Ramban and then I'll come back to that point. Right, the Ramban in Shichachas Ha'asin Dalid goes to town on the Rambam and he quotes a number of psukim from Devarim, and he says there absolutely is a positive command to make Aliyah and to live in Israel. Now, if all we had was that, right, we would say, well, it's an argument and it's a machloket. We'll generally paskin like the Rambam over almost anybody else, even despite the Ramban's greatness, right? And therefore, the conclusion might be very different. You might come to say, well, honoring your parents 1,000%, that's a 10 Commandments mitzvah. If the other one's subject to argument, maybe one outweighs the other. That actually was the position of Rav Amital when we were in Gush, right? Zecher Tzadik Livracha. Because I'm sure, he, as Rosh Yeshiva and a Hesder Yeshiva, got this question all the time. And they tried to, I guess, work with the parents, but if it came down to a standoff, his psak was that you should listen to your parents. When I was, I'm trying all the missions to Israel mixed up in my head, but we didn't go to Shalavim.
Yeah.
So that was on the RCA mission. Rav Yamar, who's Rosh Yeshiva of Sha'alvim, actually had this question come up in the aftermath of October 7th, right? So a lot of kids went back right after October 7th, and then they wanted to come back, and two kids wanted to come back, and their parents were forbidding them, and they came to Rav Yamar for a psak that they have to return, or they didn't have to leave. I forget which one it was. And again, he kind of essentially told to the kids, listen, I'm happy to talk to your parents with you, but I'm not giving you a psak that you have to, tell your parents to get lost and not listen to what they say. So I don't know that Rav Yamar is Rosh Yeshiva of a Hesder Yeshiva. He's a pretty serious guy. Rav Amital is a serious guy. So I don't know that all the Gedolei HaPoskim follow that. Now, there are let me just finish the Rambam, then I'll get to Steve's question. Right? There are other ways to read that Rambam, right? The Rambam, who thought he was the last word in lots of things, spawns so much commentary that it's frightening. You can read the Rambam in one of two ways, and all the Achronim will take one of these two paths. Number one is, legitimately, the Rambam does not think that there's an individual mitzvah to make Aliyah. Right? Maybe it's communal, maybe it's when but there's no mitzvah for an individual to get on a plane and make Aliyah, or get in a boat and make Aliyah. And the Ramban says, yes, there is. Right? And the Ramban did not have even El Al with its lousy food and bad service. They had to get on a boat with lousy food and bad service. Right?
Did he?
What?
Did the Ramban?
Yes, the
make
Ramban did.
Aliyah?
The Ramban did. But right, so one way to say the Rambam just doesn't believe believes that there's no mitzvah. Right. The other is, and this becomes just a question of how you count mitzvahs. Right. Some will say, no, the Rambam agrees that there's a mitzvah to make Aliyah. It's included or subsumed under a different mitzvah. Right? And maybe that's the mitzvah to conquer Israel. Maybe it's the mitzvah to wipe out the 7 nations. Right. You can figure out those other pieces.
For those who say it's a mitzvah to go, if you're born there, then you don't get that mitzvah?
No, the mitzvah is to live in Israel.
Oh, okay.
But how do you live in Israel? You have to get there. Right? The mitzvah is living in the land. Right? Otherwise, you could just go and come back and rack up your mitzvahs. It'll be a new chumrah of the month. Right? Could you imagine? Right. Get your rack up the chumras. And the sad thing is, I could see it. Right? But then you could just forget America. Just go from Cyprus back and forth. All right, there'll be somebody on the Lebanon border walking you in and out and in and out and in and out. although Rabbi Moshe Tarragon's son was actually injured today in Lebanon. He seems to be okay, but shrapnel actually punctured one of his lungs and shattered his ribs. He is in for a long recovery, but anyone wants to say to him for his son, just let me know. I'll forward you the WhatsApp. There was somebody who died today. Nebuch. So we shouldn't make jokes about Lebanon, but we can make jokes about Cyprus. So that again, that Ramban and Rambam is the core of this issue, and that he doesn't quote it in this tshuva. I don't have an answer, but he should have. I mean, like the Tzitz Aliyah says a tshuva, others have a. That is the source you start with, right? When you're looking at mitzvos and counting, it's always the Rambam. This source is so famous that I can tell you which one it is without even having it in front of me, because I can't do that with a lot of things. My memory is not nearly that good, but this one gets a lot of play. Now, so that again, that source should be in this tshuva. He just takes it for granted as no question is a mitzvah living in the land of Israel, which is entitled to his opinion. But that source is missing. So Steve asked a question. There are mitzvot in the land of Israel that you can perform only when you live in the land of Israel. So maybe you should have to go in order to fulfill those mitzvot.
And alternatively, why it might not be a mitzvah to live there in the same way, because that's where the only place you can do it. It's subsumed. Or precondition.
So the answer to that's a good question. I think the answer to that question is those are mitzvot that you have the opportunity to perform. So let's just enumerate some of them. Right? Truma, Meiser, right? That's the gift to the Kohen, the gift to the tithe to the Levi. Again, today it's harder than right. Shemitah. Those are not mitzvot that a Jew must do. Let me rephrase that. Let's look at tzitzis as a decent example, right? A Jew does not have to wear tzitzis. Now, since that's the reality, right, for hundreds of years, everyone makes a push, you should wear tzitzis. The halacha is, the mitzvah is that if you're wearing a four-cornered garment, you must put tzitzis on that garment. Right, so what we do is we wear a four-cornered garment so we can get the mitzvah. That is called, though, in halachic terminology, a mitzvah kiyumit. Right, it's a mitzvah that you are mekayim, that you fulfill, but not a mitzvah chiyuvit, which is an obligatory mitzvah. Right, davening, obligatory mitzvah. Yeah, it's not that if I want to daven, I should daven. Right? No, you have to daven. Right? It's not like, if I want to go to shul, then I'll daven. No, meaning you have to daven in shul, you have to daven in your house, you have to daven in the street, you have to daven. Right? That's an obligation. Right? Mezuzah is a mitzvah kiyumit. You don't have to have a house. I mean, sad if you don't. Right? You can move every 29 days and keep renting houses. You never have to put up a mezuzah in your whole life. Bad way to live, but it's the truth. You could do it. Truma and Meiser, right? Truma and Meiser are mitzvot kiyumit. They are mitzvot that you fulfill, right? There are most people in Israel today, not farmers. Used to be. Right? Shemitah and Yovel. Shemitah is not a mitzvah you must do.
Now they're all coming.
Whoever that is, if you want to mute yourself, I don't know who that is, but I hear some background peoples. Shemitah is, if you are in Israel, you cannot work the land. Right? You don't have to have a loan and then forgive it. So those are all mitzvot that are not, chiyuvit. So I think in that sense, it wouldn't rise to the level. Right? What's interesting is he thinks that making Aliyah, moving to Israel, is a mitzvah chiyuvit, not kiyumit. It's not that if you want, you should go and live there. He thinks you have to go and live there. So I think that would be the difference between those two. Okay, so that I've spoken enough. I'm happy to take any questions, should anyone wish. But in general, that's again, I think the picture. Again, any questions? Okay, then thank you for joining us. I wish you a